Hello and welcome to another edition of Adam's Music Box, where, as it seems to be increasingly, it's time to say goodbye to a legend. In this case, one of the greatest drummers to ever do it, the wonderful, the unique, the instantly recognizable Jack DeJohnette. Now, Jack had a very long and incredibly prolific career in music before he died at the age of 83. And the way I would describe his style is ultra avant-garde, but without ever abandoning groove and pulse and feel. A lot of avant-garde drumming, especially dare I say in parts of Europe, particularly Central Europe, it tends to be very dry and obtuse, where Jacques Deschanette was able to play in ensembles or even very sort of small projects, duos in some cases, while always maintaining the excitement and the groove and the human warmth that you really need in all playing, particularly on drumming, I would think, to keep it meaningful. And like all great drummers, he had a keen and very acute sense of melody, because however technical you might be around a drum kit, if you don't have that sense of melody, even all the soul in the world isn't going to help you. But luckily for the listeners and for those he played with, he had lots of both. Now, the list of who he did play with is really, really long. So I'm just going to read off some of my favorite albums that he's been a part of. The Jack DeJohnette Complex from 1968, his first album as a leader, absolutely legendary. It had people like Benny Maupin on it, who he's collaborated with so many times, Eddie Gomez, Miroslav Vitus, the great Stanley Cowell. Everyone who loves jazz piano or piano in general should listen to Stanley Cowell. And of course, another great drummer, the wonderful Roy Haynes. Ruta and I'm gonna always screw up the pronunciation. Diata, a wonderful duo with Keith Jarrett, absolutely wonderful stuff. The album Sorcery, a real unsung classic, again with Jack as leader from 1974. You've got again Benny Maupin, you've got Dave Holland, who he collaborated with a lot, John Abercrombie, who he collaborated with a lot. A real out there album, but one that I think is just perfect. The album Pictures that he did as a duo with Abercrombie in 77, amazing. And that was one of the early albums he did when he switched to ECM Records, where he stayed for a long time, right up until almost the end of his recording career. Now, he performed a lot with Chick Corea, the album Sundance, such a great album with Chick, as was an album that I believe was from the same year the album is. He played with Lee Konitz, who sort of both of them on that more avant-garde side of the jazz world. Wonderful. He played on one of the best albums of all time in any genre, Charles Lloyd's Forest Flower, and that came out in 67. Wonderful album. Cedar Walton's Spectrum. I would call that a classic as well. He played on one of my favorite Miles Davis albums. Jack Johnson did a lot of work with Miles Davis. Played on Straight Life, one of the best albums of all time in any genre, a Freddie Hubbard album. Joe Zawinul's self-titled album, absolutely fantastic. The Rite of Spring, a much more laid-back CTI album where Hubert Laws was leading a band. Bob James was on that record, as was the legend Ron Carter. Polar AC and First Light, both from 1971. Again, Freddie Hubbard at his absolute peak. Moon Gems with one of my favorite saxophonists of all time, Joe Farrell. And this quartet also featured Herbie Hancock, with whom Jack played a lot, as well as the wonderful Stanley Clarke. A Giant Box, a great Don Sebesky album. I've talked about him before. Absolutely wonderful. So many. Jan Garbarek he played with, places that was again, we're in the ECM era now. McCoy Tyner, one of the great pianists of all time, his Together album, which featured Bobby Hutcherson, one of the great vibesmen of all time. Again, Stanley Clarke, such great people that he played with. Sonny Rollins, the list goes on. And like I said, even among prolific drummers, he was among the most prolific of all time. Really, really excellent stuff. And, it's these people that seem ageless because he kept on playing, he kept looking great, sounding great, and it's just always sad to say goodbye, even after a long time. But Please go out there, listen to any of those albums I mentioned. Those just happen to be my favorites, but he was on so many great ones. Rest in peace, Jack DeJohnette, one of the greatest drummers of all time.